3, 2, 1. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are on another installation of the After Dark. Our lovely hosts, Eddie Bear, also me, and MK Lunding are going to be on in a hot second. So hold tight as we get this going.
Yes. For anybody tuning in via my Instagram or this newly created YouTube channel, just bear with us. For a few minutes here, we'll try to get things set up. It's just going to take us a second. If you can't hear anything, let us know. If there's any feedback on your end, let us know also. So, Eddie, how's your week been, man?
Week's been good. Just rewarding week, 100%. So I know this is the final. I know Patrick just signed on. I just saw him downstairs, but wrapping up tax season right now. So I guess everyone's trying to hit whatever 11:59 deadline they can before they leave the day. So how about yourself? How are you doing?
It's been busy, man. It's been a wild week. Today capped off with I guess kind of a little bit of a bittersweet moment in regards to the rental property. Anybody that follows my account knows that I sold. My screen keeps going dark here, so knows that I sold my first rental property. We talked about it a few times on the live stream. Today it closed, and so it was really interesting to kind of go through that. It's been a couple of years since I sold the property. Completely different set of circumstances. So yeah, it's just been really interesting to kind of go through that. Today, but it's been business-wise, it's been a busy week. I had a client who successfully bought a house last night. A couple files that are closing up within the next couple of weeks. So just kind of managing, staying on top of that. It's been just been an interesting kind of process. So.
No, I think we're starting to ramp up more into the spring season, spring going into summer, right? So that transition, it still hasn't ended and it keeps snowballing, and it's just making sure that all processes are running at 100% to make sure everything keeps alive. I was having this talk today earlier. So usually Matt sometimes comes on them, but we have our optional team meeting, and usually it's myself and Devin on there. And then occasionally we'll get some stragglers that come on in throughout the day. But yeah, I guess today's conversation, we were just really reflecting on our growth and our change from last year to this year and what we've done so differently. And I guess more proactively to get prepared as the season starts to change. I know for mortgage brokers, it comes in ebbs and flows, right? Like January, February, same with the real estate industry. It tends to be a little bit of a lull, and then you have to really start ramping it up in March and April, and kind of goes with the territory, right? So we're just talking about how we're excited for next year. And I know it's only 3 months into this year, or just 4 months finished into this year, and just looking forward, what is next year going to look like, right? And seeing how much growth has happened and the maturity in our own business models and our processes, and then come next year, how is that actually going to look like? So it was so sweet because I remember Devin, myself, and Cappy were all new together, and then we're seeing how much has increased in that knowledge base that we've been able to expand and then again articulate to clients too. So I love that, and it was just a great start off to your Friday, which you get to kind of look back and say, yeah, I remember that. I remember what last year was compared to this year and where we were all sitting at by this point.
Yeah, it was interesting. I had a call this week with my coach, I guess, right? And we were talking about how just kind of, like you said, right, the ebbs and flows of the mortgage industry, and real estate in general, right? Obviously, there's wild cards and there's factors that come into it all the time. But she was talking specifically about how typically January, February, slower months, like you said, March picks up, April's a little crazy, May's wild, June slows down a bit. July gets crazy. And yeah, I mean, you guys were, I guess, we're talking about today. I'm disappointed it's one that I didn't tune into, because it sounds like you said it was, extremely valuable to sit back and reflect and see how you can, how we're all going to grow kind of over this next little bit, right? So,
yeah, because last year was like gloom and doom in March, man. March going into April. I remember we were having this conversation, and then Devin and I started talking. And at that point, we were like, how the hell are we going to do this?
Yeah.
The pandemic was in full swing, and we were like, just for lack of a better term, just pretty much sitting there. We were sitting in it, and we were like, this is tough. And like the outlook looked, I don't know. I guess you've been on our team chats and like on the WhatsApp and hearing the call, like having Colin hear his conversation about how those moments of wanting to give up. I'm like, that was a big give up moment for me. That was a big one where I'm like, I bit too much more than I can chew. And it's crazy looking at it from like 1 year and knowing that like grind through it, keep going, refine the processes. And like, until you're in full swing and you're busy, you don't get what that means until like every process has to be refined, right? Like, and even now I'm still refining things, and how can I do things better? How can communicate more effectively? Like, I know there's different personalities or styles that people like their communication, and I guess honing in on that, that's what I'm more focused on, right? Can I make the client experience more enjoyable and also the realtor relationship more enjoyable? So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, right? I mean, especially you guys being so new last year, right? I mean, I've been pretty nerdy. I always talked about this a few times in the 13, 14 episodes that we've been through. But yeah, it's a real fight or flight kind of moment for you guys. And, you guys, like a lot of businesses, kind of had to figure out how to pivot, right? And, we talked to some of the other people on our team about how they've done that. I think one of the things, and don't pat yourself too hard on the back here, but like one of the things you talk about like enough in these meetings, and you and I and Dev have talked about this quite a bit, is that you really realize that people were more captivated on their phones, right? You're home, you're not really doing anything, you can't go anywhere. So what do you inevitably do? For 99% of the population, that's I'm going to spend my time crushing Netflix and pulling to refresh on Instagram, Facebook, Clubhouse now, like whatever TikTok, like depending on how old you are. And you really just realize that, right? I think that was part of your blessing, kind of going back through and doing on you, is that like when you really started ramping up your content, and it's something that you still say to this day, right? Is that people are more engaged with their phones, and therefore that's where you need to be, right?
Yeah. Well, there's this sorry, I mean to cut you off there, but I think there's this philosophy that I've always had that like your cell phone becomes an extension of you. Right? And it's everywhere you go. It's you leave your phone behind. Nobody likes that feeling. They'll go back and go nuts for it. So I think at a time when everybody was so vulnerable, they just glued themselves to their phones. And the best way, and I remember his name was Dave Bell. He's the senior vice president of Infotech of sales, and he said you have to literally do by air, by land, or by sea, in terms of like waving your hands in front of people saying, hey, I'm right here. So whether that be hitting the phones, hitting up LinkedIn, which was their marketing style, or emailing people. And that was it. And then he's like, you have to somehow like wave your hand to the point to say, I'm a real person. I want to communicate with you. But I took that lesson from that experience and saying, can I do that effectively on an Instagram? But I didn't want it to come off super salesy because I think it's been done. And I'm like, and one thing I'm passionate about is just educating people. Like we know this by our different client experiences where you take the client all the way through. And I love that. I'm like, if there's a rock that they want uncovered, I'm going to uncover it. And I'm going to explain the whole process behind what it's like to get a mortgage, even if they already are better. And I'm like, have you explored these options? You know what to go through. And that's where I love being able to be that knowledge base and an expert for them, right?
Yeah. Now, is there, Is there one set of questions you're seeing more frequently now? Like, you know, I see Jason just joined into the stream. As we talk about literally every time he pops on these streams.
Oh, I know.
Jason's our team lead.
Does Jason want to sign on? I'm gonna send him a request. We'll see if he wants to come on. I would love him just to kind of get an experience. I talk about him all the time. A bunch of my buddies know, like I've talked about Jason, and he met me when I was a young lad, and I was at Fanshawe in accounting, and he was my economics professor. And he's had probably one of the most impacts in my life in terms of wanting to pursue more, whether that be pushing myself in the accounting industry or then going to go find out what B2B sales is like so I could come back as a mortgage broker. Mm-hmm. So we'll see if he wants to sign on. He's going to be in his sweatpants right now on his couch.
Sweatpants and hoodie.
Yeah,
it's probably getting ready to watch a movie with his better half or hang out with the family. But we appreciate him tuning in every week. But
I sent him the request. We'll see if he goes on. If he goes on, he goes on. If he doesn't, he doesn't. But
I don't like the chances here. Our classic WhatsApp chat. We'll see. I doubled down. I don't see it coming. But what were we talking about before we went on?
It's just like what people are doing to pivot themselves, right, and tackling all that. And you can quote me on it. Jason is unable to join. Wah wah. Yeah. But
I think what we were talking about was questions, right? Sorry to talk over you there. But one of the questions that I've been asked a lot more recently, I know we've talked about on the team, I think that was the jumping off point to Jason, was that Jason, Devin, like a few of the people on the team have actually kind of already started to run into these questions, which is, hey, what do you think about a 7 or a 10-year rate? I have a client asking this weekend. And, you know, it's an interesting conversation. I mean, I'll kind of ask the question to you, but before I let you answer, what I will say is that what a lot of people are realizing now is that there is a very real chance that these historically low interest rates that we've seen now for, you know, probably the last 5 years for sure, if not, you know, the last decade, it's going to start going up. Right. Everybody kind of always knew this was going to happen. The other shoe eventually was going to drop. Nobody knows the magnitude, but you know, when dealing with uncertainty, most people get concerned, right? Which is fair. Like I understand where that's coming from. But what it's leading to now is people thinking about these longer term mortgages, so that way they have these lower rates for longer. And so with that, like I'll kind of ask you, Eddie, like, you know, have you had anybody reach out about a 7 or a 10? And if you have, like, what do you say to them?
Yeah. So for anybody that's listening, I guess your traditional mortgage is a 5-year term, right? Unless you're going on the B side, they're 1 or 2 year terms because they're short term, you're paying a higher interest rate. But what we're alluding to here is, can you have a 10-year term where you're obligated to have it longer to lock it in for a longer period of time? I haven't had that question asked. I actually just looked it up right now so I could have it available to give you in market what that would look like. You know what I mean? So I'm taking an institutional lender, right? Not a monoline lender. And I'm going to go off of their rates that I have published right now. And you're looking at on a 25-year AM on a 10-year fixed mortgage, you're looking at 3.3.
Okay.
Right?
So what is the comparable 5-year, or what's a 3-year? Just before you answer that question, it is important to know that like the most common rate is the 5-year fixed. There are shorter terms available, whether you're on the A or the B side, just depending on kind of what the solution is for you. But so you said 3.34 on a 10-year fixed, 25-year AM. What is the 5-year fixed?
The 5-year fixed is 2.44. Same lender,
yeah.
Right? So nearly 90 basis points shorter, right, or less, right? Yeah. So. Shorter, less, same thing. But the posted rate at which your penalty is being, and I guess this is where the conversation goes, right, is what does the penalty look like? So we've talked about this, and the reason why we go, and I chose an institutional lender for this specific reason, is that a lot of clients will go with the big 5 or big 4 or that you want to have as the large banks, right? And what tends to be the problem is that the restrictiveness within the product, meaning if you are to leave, you are subject to the interest rate differential, which is a penalty, a part of your prepayment penalty that you have to pay. But that is subject to their internal posted rate. That internal posted rate isn't what you receive. Your in-market rate is discounted from that posted rate. So you're now paying interest that you have signed up for them. So in a nutshell, you now owe them that interest for the remaining months available in your term, because that's the contract that you sign. You extend that to 10 years and you break it in years 2 or 3 or 4, you have 6 years of an interest rate differential that you have to come up with, right? So the problem is here is that the posted rate on a 10-year is 5.6%, whereas the posted rate on a 5-year is 4.59.
Yeah, it's a nasty little spread, right? What it comes down to, I think probably one of the overarching points here to have this conversation with your mortgage professional is like just to make sure that you're informed, right, about kind of some of those finer details about your mortgage. One of the other important ones, it's a product out there that, I mean, we offer as well, and the big 5 or big 4, kind of the banks that everybody knows about. That's what we mean by the big 5. Your RBC,
CIBC.
You know, yeah, CIBC, my own banking institutions. Anyway, my bad, CIBC. Looking forward to the promotional interest on the E-Advantage savings account this month. But so one of the programs that they offer, and like I said, we offer 2, is the cash back mortgage. And sometimes that is a very great solution for people. But what's important to understand, and this is where you go to your mortgage professional, is what are the little details between each lender that separate that. So for example, I have a client right now who they are on year 3 of a 5-year cashback mortgage. I think it was a 1% cashback. They got advanced about 13 grand. And one of the details they didn't know was that if they break, they owe the 13 grand back. And that gets factored into their payout statement, which is, when we look to refinance, part of that process involves contacting your previous lender to get your payout statement to figure out what you owe, so that way they can properly be paid out for what they want. You can still capitalize into your mortgage, that way there's no payment out of pocket, but they had no idea, right? And there's some other lenders where, even that we deal with that very similar policy. There's some that do it based on where you are in your term, right? So, just to make the numbers simple, you're in year 3 of 5, and you've got advanced rent. Well, you have 40% of your term left, therefore 40% of 10 grand is payable. So it's just important to kind of understand some of those details, right? And you were just talking about the IRD, right? Do they use posted? Do they go off the discounted rates? Because that in itself can be, especially if you're looking at a 7 account, like that can be tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
It really adds. But
well, I remember on my LinkedIn, this was in September, I believe, there was an article that was posted, and this borrower, their penalty with 3 years remaining was $20,000, right? And that's only on a term that's remaining with 3, right? Like 3 years. That's and now imagine adding another 5 years on top of that, right? Like you have an 8-year term. Like just take a look at those numbers alone and how much it's going to factor in. I'm not a fan of if the client is looking at like, hey, I want a 10-year, I will do my best to educate them on the disadvantages and the advantages of having one, right? I think the clear one that we both can understand, I think that everyone can, is that, well, the unknown or uncertainty of the market and wanting to lock in a rate, especially now at these historical lows, is a great idea, right? Because pre-COVID, looking at January, your 3.15 was a solid rate. I remember I was competing at 3.15. For my first file, I was competing at 3.15 with RBC, right? Course, and they were originally offered 3.35, I believe it was. or 3.25. I think that was the number. So that's where we were at, right? So now you're looking at 3.3, okay, on a 25-year for 25-year AM on a 10-year fix. But that's the only big positive behind it, right? The risk is life. And I think that's the biggest one is life in general. You cannot predict 5 years, let alone 10 years down the road. Now, don't get me wrong.
I can't even predict 2 years down the road.
Yeah.
Like 5? No.
Yeah, no. People can't even predict the weather for the next day. and you're going to tell me that, like, and that's the toughest part, right? Is where I think a lot of people are set in their minds where I want to have that 10-year fix because I don't want to move. I don't want to. But like you're assuming that rates are going to be higher than 3.3 in 5 years. If that's your assumption, and you don't know that, nobody knows that. Nobody knows what rates are going to be like in 5 years' time. They still could be hovering around low threes.
Yeah, they certainly could be, right? I think that's, I was listening to this, and you take everything you see online with a grain of salt, right? You always want to try to see this kind of it. But I was listening to this quote-unquote financial guru out of the States who talked about, like, one of the real things that we're probably going to experience for the first time in a while, right? It's certainly the first thing that I will have ever experienced. You'll be in the same boat. Probably a lot of our, some members on our team, a lot of our team will be in the same boat, is we're likely probably going to go through this period of inflation, right? We kind of already see it with a lot of the everyday consumables that we go through. One of the ways to offset that or to kind of hedge against that is with real estate, but it probably means that rates are going to go up. That's normally one of the very common fiscal financial policies to help mitigate the pace of inflation. But to your point, yeah, life happens. You may lose your job, you may have health, you may move around, your relationship dynamic could change for better or for worse. And locking into something really long-term like that can have very adverse impacts. You don't really have to go far down memory lane to see that, right? Like you just told the story about how rates have changed in a year. One of my first files was, a friend of mine who, and I've told this story on probably 3 or 4 of these lives, who always went variable, right? And saw the rates and was like, hey, rates can't go any lower. That was his educated opinion, right? Just like I'm saying, and you're saying, like, we think rates are going to go up. How high? Nobody knows, right? But he was like, yeah, I'm going to go fixed. And then a couple things happened in his life. He decided that he had a shift in goals and needed to refinance. And that wasn't conducive to, that wasn't in line with his mortgage. And therefore, he was staring down the barrel of a $19,000 penalty.
Yeah.
He's got 4 years left. So
that's the truth of the matter, right? Is that these penalties are there. And I think that we echo these stories a lot, not even as like a form of fear mongering, but as a reality check, right? That like these aren't some spoofs that happen or these like one-offs. Like, no, these are very dire consequences to making the wrong mistake and taking the wrong advice. Yeah. And it's about, and the thing is, there's a level of onus to it, right? Like if you're given all of your options and you're saying from restrictive to least restrictive, penalty included and all that, and then you make that decision and you knew it, different story. But it's the ones who wake up one day and say, well, yes, I did lose my job. I have to sell my home. I'm anticipating on X amount of dollars to pay back, right? Or I want to refinance it because the life's happening. I want to be able to reno and then flip or do something. And then next thing you know, you have this huge penalty that comes in that eats into what you thought you had available, right?
Yeah, I had that, I know we both do this, but for those that are tuning in that may not know this, but like you and I both present, and a lot of members aren't familiar with it's not unique to Eddie. But we present you with options. And or things to consider. And like you said, like if you want to go with something, then we'll educate you around it and we'll go with it. So I had a client this week who was looking to purchase and kind of had a few different options. I gave him 4 that I thought fit his needs pretty well, and they ranged in term, right, which is kind of fitting. I guess we started down this path talking about 5, 7, 10, 6 months, all the different terms that are out there. And I said, like, look, I have a 2-year term for you that like is going to be your lowest interest rate. But the flip thing to consider is that if your income is variable, then you run the risk that 2 years down the road, like you're going to have to requalify. And can you requalify? And he's like, well, 2 years down the road, like I can't get a house, then I'll just sell the house. And well, in theory, like I said, well, like I'm sure you don't want to sell the house. And he's like, no, I don't. I'm like, well, that's why I kind of pitched a longer term, right? That it, yes, the volume, the rates are up a little bit, but it's not. There's peace of mind that comes in the longer term in this specific example. So we'll see what he ends up doing, but it's one of those things where you just try to find outcomes that fit the client's needs. And sometimes you have to marry a couple of solutions together. Sometimes you come up with one right off the bat. It's a very clean file. Doesn't always work out that way, right?
So let me ask you a question then. How important is an exit strategy when having these conversations with a client?
So the answer is it's extremely important, but it depends on what type of client it is, right? We have this discussion as a team quite a bit around who fills certain niches, right? And right, wrong, or different, given I own investment properties and kind of are actively involved in that scene. A lot of my clients that come to me are investors, and that's where I would say the exit strategy is probably most important, right? Before I go down that route, well, briefly, like what I said to the client that was considering, okay, well, after 2 years I might sell. It's like, well, who knows what the market does in 2 years? Like you have that attitude today, and if the market continues to appreciate, then yeah, you know what, like you may not care as much if you have to sell and move back into your multi-family property. But if the market goes down, like some people are really hopeful for, or think could happen, then you're not going to be excited about selling because you're going to be, you run the risk, especially if it's a high ratio mortgage. Like you could be underwater on your house. Right. The example I always make is that, you look at somebody that's bought a car and maybe or SUV, it doesn't really matter. They bought a vehicle and the vehicle may not work out. Maybe the payments are too high. Maybe it's a lot worse on gas than they thought. So then they go to trade it in. And unless you've put a substantial down payment down, there's a pretty real risk that you're going to be what's referred to as underwater on your car, meaning the trade-in value is less than what you owe. And everybody says, oh, well, the solution is you just roll that into the new mortgage or into the new vehicle loan, and it just compounds things more and more. It's a lot harder, and it's a lot worse when you're underwater on a house. Yeah. But in terms of knowing the exit before you enter, like I tell the investing clients this all the time, right? Whether they're coming to me for a career financing solution or a more traditional financing solution, like I ask because I'm genuinely interested. Like, what's your plan for the property? Are you going to sell it? Like, is this a flip? Is it a BRRRR? Is it a long-term buy and hold? Like, tell me about the property. And from that, you kind of just evaluate financing options. I had a talk with a gentleman a couple months ago who was from our, nation's capital, and he was looking at buying a property with a BPD, which for anybody that doesn't know, it's short form for a vendor take back. which just means that the seller of the home is going to put up part of the purchase or part of the purchase price, which serves as your down payment. And so we're talking about his exit plan there, and it was very clear that like a VTB did not fit, like was not a good option for him. Didn't fit with the deal. The deal really wasn't a great deal. And so you kind of have those conversations, right? To try to answer this a little bit more succinctly, the three questions I always ask investors are, A, what's your plan for the property? B, what's it going to be worth? Especially if it needs renovations. And like C, like what are you trying to get out of it, right? So when you have the conversation with somebody that maybe they're exploring, like doing private financing, it's like, okay, you're buying it for 200, you're going to put 100 in. What's it going to be worth? Oh, okay, it's going to be worth 500,000. Are you going to keep it as a rental? Yeah. Okay. Well, what's the rent? And what you look at there is where I come in financing is if everything goes according to your plan, how are you going to refinance? Right? The BRRRR method, the buy, renovate, rehab, rent, refinance relies on the fact that you can refinance your rental costs and ideally back at it. And so it's so important to understand kind of what your goal with the property is, right? How does that fit with your lifestyle? What's it going to fit with like theoretical, 3 to 5 year plan? If you're buying a house to own for 1 to 2 years, I don't know. Like, is it worth buying? There's a lot of costs that go into buying a home, right? It's not just a down payment. There's transfer tax. There's legal fees. There could be inspections. Not to mention the everyday repairs that you have as a home. And so, if you're just buying a property, especially if it's going to go up in value, then I don't know. It's a short-term play. It doesn't always make sense, which is weird, right? A lot of times, like, well, why did you tell me that? Well, like, I don't just want to put you in a mortgage or get you a mortgage for a house that's not a good financial need, right? I had this conversation today when I created a few videos that I drove away and one of the things I talked about in one of these videos, which start releasing next week, was that I was so grateful that I was able to sell the property when the tenants in. Because as crazy as the housing market is, the rental market is insane. There's even less supply than there is for houses, especially in the area. And the rental prices are crazy. I was talking to a guy today that was looking at moving his mother down from just outside of GTA, move her down to St. Thomas into into an accessible a one-bedroom apartment. I asked them, like, oh, what's rent at this building? $1,575 for a one-bedroom unit. And while part of me likes to hear, like, I don't know, I like to hear that. Part of me is like, oh, part of me as an investor is like, oh, that's great because it gives you an appreciation for what the market value is like. Right? Yeah. If you own a rental property and you have a tenant turnover, it's good to know if you're not already checking what the value is. But it's insane. $1,575 for a one-bedroom, maybe 700, 800 square foot apartment. 700 is probably on the high side. $1,575. Crazy. Like you feel bad for people. And I'm going to shut up for a second and then I'll ask you a question because I don't think my friend's going to end up hopping on this live stream. He had a question for us.
Yeah, no, I guess I was going to go back to what we were talking about in terms of the exit strategy and the importance behind it. It's because even similar, whether you're the real estate investment side, we have this, and the reason why we ask about the exit strategy is that there are different solutions for everyone, right? And your traditional lending options, going with that AAA lender, doesn't necessarily fit your everyday person. Sometimes you're self-employed. You have to use a stated income program. There's a business for sale program where you can take what you deduct on line 150 or what you'd claim on line 150 and don't have to gross up anything, right? So there are different plays that you can take. And one of the biggest takeaways that I've noticed is what is the exit strategy? And making sure you can convey that message and leverage it to your clients so they can understand exactly what they're getting in. And today, Cappy brought up a really great point, which is when we're looking at taking a client on that short 1 year or 2 year term, paying a higher bit of interest, using the stated income program where you can then gross up their net, using their gross revenue and taking a look at their and their net deposits. Do they have the cash flow to claim X amount of dollars, right? So using it, just basic numbers, client or borrower, gross revenue is $150,000, right? Net income is very, very low. We're talking about $30,000, $40,000, not enough to qualify them for, let's say, a $500,000 home where you need 6 figures. So in this case, we say, well, we take a look at their expenses, and on paper, they actually make $100,000. We can support that by the bank deposits going in and out of the account, and also the expenses associated to that. So what you can't just position a 2 year term for them and say that's it, and then we just keep doing 2 years over and over again. You have to have that exit strategy in mind. And the conversation goes, well, in the next 2 years, are you going to start claiming that income tax? So you going to start claiming that income, so then you can go to the A side, right? Once we're done your 2 year term, and then have 2 years of income that has been taxed and reported on your T1, right? Or on your T2, depending on the organization, the way that it's structured. Sometimes, though, the cost of the interest that you're paying is less than the income taxes that you would be paying doing this over the next 2 years. So that's the strategy conversation you have to have with the client. And Cappy said it well, where he's just like, he likes giving it to the client so they can decide where they go, right? Because sometimes, like when I just broke up the 2020 tax brackets, right? You're looking at anything under $97,000 is about 20.5 on the federal side, and then 10% on the provincial side as well, right? So you have to factor that in if you're going to be taking that onto your own income and claiming it on your T1, that you're going to have to pay that money. Is it less expensive to pay the higher interest rate or going on the tax side, right? So these are some of the conversations you really have to have. And yeah, Devin was on this call as well. And like you said, love to add exit strategy is key. And I think that conversation needs to be more important because it's really about, well, what's their goal in mind, right? And in my case, I have a client where their goal is to refi the rest. I guess we've decided that the strategy together that we're going to work on is within that 2 year term, refi the rental property, pay off the principal residence, have the one mortgage outstanding on the property, and therefore they can rinse and repeat. Use the principal resident as the cash cow to start funding more investment properties, right? Nice. So it's nice to know that, and like even hearing you coming in from the real estate investment side about, well, do you buy hold strategy? Is it BRRRR? Like these are the conversations we love to start having with our clients because that's where you can become the educator and the expert in the space.
Yeah, no, 100%, Ed, and I mean today's the last day to get your taxes in. But what I would say, depending on what type of organization or what type of individual you are, but what I would say is a quick PSA coming from two accountants is that okay? What have we got going on here? I see we got a question. We'll ask
with the glasses.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to make my quick thing, and then we'll answer Dev's question, which is, as a PSA for business owners, please put some money aside every month for taxes.
Yep.
Or even more preferably, pay that direct to the CRA. Yes, you will lose some marginal interest you will get in your savings account. But the flip side is, as life happens, you know that like, oh, I have some cash sitting here. oh, I could spend it and buy this. Whereas if it's already out of your bank account, then you're kind of prepaying, right? And this can happen on the personal side as well. If you're just you have regular kind of employment income or rental income, you can do it there too. But especially true, I would say, for small business owners, is that whether you're having your best year ever or you're having your worst year ever, and you're really tight on cash, just put a little bit of money aside every month. Take, for a quick and dirty calc, look at what you owed in the year previous, divide that by 12, and prepay or save that amount. So that way, when you get the tax bill at the end of the year, it's not crazy. I know one of my tax clients I have, I remember the first year I did their taxes, I was scared shitless for them. Did their tax return, they owed like 19 grand. And I'm like, I have to call and tell them this, right? It's just like when you have, to make this relevant to the mortgage side, there are some mortgages that you can't get funded, right? And so instead of sending that email saying, oh, hey, you owe 19 grand, or oh, hey, couldn't get your mortgage done, you make the call. And so I called them and I said, hey guys, I finished up your taxes. Your taxes for the year, you owe 19 grand. They're like, oh, okay, that's great. We have like 17K already saved. And I'm just like, oh, thank God. But yeah. So I will read Jeff's question. That way you don't have to put your glasses back on.
Man, I was signing them up so I could.
I don't want to rob you of that opportunity. So
no, I'll let you go for it, man. I don't want to be looking this old, looking at the screen like this.
So interesting. I'm going to let you answer this first, and not so that way I can kind of come up with an answer. He says, as it's the end of the month, can you guys share one of your, like, a win from the month? No BS, something you guys feel really good about this month in terms of your business that happened. Interesting. That's a great question, Dev. Eddie, you want to answer that first? What was something you were super proud about this month that you did?
Yeah, without going into specifics, I've had this conversation before with the team, and it's just how much more prepared I am for the talk. You know what I mean? How much more prepared I am to face that hard conversation that you don't really want to, the one where you're just like, you know what I mean? And nobody wants to give bad news, but I think once that happened, I think that was a big sigh of relief, because I will always remember that feeling of knowing that is the hardest conversation I've had to have this year. You know what I mean? And knowing that any conversation I had before, if it compares to that, then it's going to be good. And it's probably one of the happiest things I had to go through, like that comfort zone, and like just that comfort zone. If it's like a circle, it just went that much further out. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it just like, and I'm like, cool, like we're right here. Let's push that just a little further there. And like, I was so proud of myself for that. And it's just, it really took a lot. It took a lot for me to be able to get to that stage, and then coming full circle and having this conversation with even Devin and Cappy earlier today about where things started off and where they are now. And it just, I'm so proud of myself and my business for where it is. And yeah, that's a big one. It's just expanded the comfort zone just that much more outside of it. And yeah, hoping that's now that I've created enough buffer, I don't have to go that far out anymore. But that's good. That's me, man. That was a happy one. How about you, man?
So I was too engaged listening to what you were saying that it was hard for me to actually take the time to come up with a singular win. This was so on like a purely numbers thing like this. I think I submitted or locked up like 4 deals this month that close that close within the next 30 days, or within the next 45, I guess now, from the end of the month. That was probably a huge thing for my business, mostly because it was like probably a validation thing, to be honest with you. You know, when you're new to the space or when you launch any new business, everything sounds really plausible. It sounds really good in your head. And while these aren't the first files that I've done, it was kind of that first step of momentum that I really started to feel. And what that translated into was a bit of a mindset shift. And I'll go a little bit into that. I'm not going to go like totally high in the sky because not everybody loves talking about mindset and all that stuff and how it's important. But the mindset really allowed me to just reframe how I looked at certain things in my personal, professional, and in my business life. One of the things that we kind of talked, I think, a little bit about last week, because when it comes to mindset, there's ups and downs, right? And a couple of weeks ago was probably one of those down spots, but then those files kind of came through and it, kind of helped to lift up a little bit. But it just caused me to reevaluate parts of my life. And one of the things was, we talk about growing our businesses. And while it's important, one of the things we touched on, I think, a little bit last week was the importance that like your business isn't everything. And it's tough because you want to crush it for all your clients, right? You want to over deliver. But at the same point, like we are humans, right? You talked about last week how like we talked about time with family. One of the things that I was really reflecting on was like, I don't really care. Like, I don't care if my business is taking off, if it comes at the expense of not only my relationship with friends and family, but if it comes in the sacrifice of like my health. And so with that, like I've taken a kind of a big step forward to me or in my own eyes to say like, look, if you're going to spend all this money on your business, like you should spend the money also on your health, right? So I was actually talking with some personal trainers this past week and kind of getting that going because while I have trust in myself, I think at least to start, I certainly need that accountability partner. But none of that would have happened, like that mindset shift. It may have happened, but probably just not as quickly had I not gotten the momentum this week with kind of those files kicking off. So
that's beautiful, man.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully, Dad, that answered your question well. I know Eddie's answer, as usual, is always better than mine, but
no, not even, man. You're like, I think everyone's answer is just as fucking beautiful.
Oh,
you know what I mean? And just seeing that growth, though, right? And like, I think you nailed it on the head. That there's something validating behind that. Like, yeah, I can do this. I'm like, if this is just the start, then what does the middle look like, right? And you don't start a business and then say in year 5 you end it. So it's not like, oh, here we go. It's like, no, here this goes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the mind-blowing thing. And like that's why even though you say like, oh, let's not get into it about mindset, dude, like mindset is fucking everything. Yeah. And I think that it's so important for anybody who is starting anything that brings them purpose or brings them some awakening, you know what I mean? That they're happy to do it, that like your mindset needs to be like just so in the zone. And you need to know that on those good days, as much as those bad days, that you got to keep going, you got to keep pushing through and knowing that it's for the greater good. Yeah. Right? And I think that's the most beautiful thing behind it. And I'm so grateful for having people just like yourself, you know what I mean, and our teammates. And that's why I always give the random love every once in a while, because it's just that when you're practicing that gratitude and seeing those people who are influential in your life, like I feed off of a lot of you guys on our team. And I see the encouragement and support, and also I see you guys hustling every single day. And it's very impactful and something that I'm so fortunate to be a part of such a close-knit team. Right. And like Devin says, thank you guys. Love to see you guys killing it and so proud of you both. Sweetheart. Devin's crushing it, man. Devin's doing
crushing it. Yeah. It's it's one of those things tough where I'm kind of relying, in talking about mindset and the importance of it, kind of also reminded of the fact that one of the sayings that's really common out there is you don't make you never make decisions based on emotion, right? Which is a lot easier said than done. Just to kind of hopefully quickly gloss over this, which, as anybody knows, I've been through the last 13 or 14 episodes. It's not my strong suit. But, leaving the property today, I remember when we first talked about it probably 6 episodes ago, it was a business decision, ultimately. But as I drove away today for the last time and got home, it was emotional.
Yeah.
It really was. I'm not saying that I was, hysterically crying in the bathroom, but I invested a lot of time. I was grateful for the people that put in the time with me, not just the contractors, the person I bought the property through, sold the property through. There's just a lot of investment to it, and it's not something that. I don't know what you, Eddie, but sometimes when you're going through life, yes, you're focusing on what you're going through, but sometimes there's a point in your life when it just really hits home. And as I got home today, literally, it hit home. That you know what? My first investment property is gone. And I was kind of just overcome with gratitude for the process and for the learning. And I take away from that yes, it was a business decision, but it doesn't mean that it's all business and there's no pleasure and there's no emotion in it, because there is. We're not robots, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It was
well, that's the one thing, right? And the emotions come from being, I guess, the person that it created, you know what I mean? As a result of having that thing in your life. And that's it's made you more of this, not saying you weren't beforehand, but more business savvy or more understanding of the industry. And it's giving you this level of insight that you wouldn't have had beforehand. And you are grateful, you know what I mean? You can see it, you can hear it within the passion, the way that you speak about just real estate altogether. And where that comes from, and that's probably that's definitely was an emotional day, right? Being able to see that property go, being that's your first baby, right?
It was. Yeah. I got to talk to the tenants on the way out. It just kind of reminded you of why you do what you do, right?
Yeah.
That classic golden rule, right? You treat others the way you want to be treated. Yes, they were my tenants, but there was a point in time where I lived there. So the one couple, the couple and their friend that are up in the upper unit, they're also kind of my housemates.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go as far as saying that we were best friends, but we text, which extremely good things for me when the sale happened. I actually have a family member that lives in the main floor unit for right now. It was just, it was so surreal, right? You create, when I look at myself as an investor, you create units that you want people to want to live in. But hey, it's enough about other things and all that stuff.
Yeah. No, well, that's. I remember it was super important to you. You even were talking about the one key thing about, I guess, attracting the tenants that you want is creating an environment that they would love to live in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, for anybody that's still sticking around or that has popped back in, I'll tease it out here. But it hasn't been put anywhere on social. But picked up another triplex. That was the silver lining. Was that I sold this duplex to get a triplex. And the transformation, I'll tell you right now, is going to be huge. It's going to be great. I can't wait to do it. I was saying to Katie and some of our family members today that as much as I was excited about this duplex, like I am fucking ecstatic for this triplex.
Yeah.
It's so sweet, but
you're gonna knock it out, man. Well, then I think you should start pitching Railway City Investments a lot more because me and Deb were like, "Whoa, what is this?"
Yeah. It's the downside of having too many social accounts. I don't know how people do it. I was talking to a contractor today or this week who just did this amazing flip in St. Thomas on Omimi Street. It's being rep by Rosalind Ayers from St. Thomas Town and Country. And I actually went through the property with my agent and was like, last post 2020. Yeah, I know, Deb. It's hurting. I think the last post was my brother's gender reveal, but so I've got to start posting there unless on the MK lending. But I went through that property. Yeah. I went through that property with my agent, and I texted the contractor that like the couple that bought it and flipped it. I said, like, honestly, like I am so glad I didn't buy the property. They're like, oh, why is that? I'm like, because I wouldn't have done half the job that you did. You should try that. That's nice stuff. But any big plans for the weekend, bud?
Myself?
Yep.
I'm actually making even though I'm not supposed to, my sister actually just injured herself. So she, and it sucks. If you listen to this, I'm sorry, I'm sharing your stuff out here. But yeah, she rolled her ankle and she just got x-rays done today and there's a chip on it. And then she's moving into her new place this weekend. So her and her boyfriend she's just like, he's got to lift everything and move everything. So I told him, like, I'll come up. I know it's a stay-at-home order, but I'm like, I'm not going to leave you high and dry there. Like, especially I can only imagine what she's going through, let alone trying to orchestrate movers to get there. I'm like, you're not going to find anybody on time. So they're doing all the small stuff. They took possession, I think, last or midweek. So they've kind of moved some things and they're just leaving all the heavier stuff. So I got to go there tomorrow. So it's going to be a big one. And yeah. So I'm hoping to get that done. I told him, I'm like, I'll leave here maybe at 8 a.m. and then do the move and then head on home. So,
nice.
Yeah, buddy. How about you? What do you have? Anything big planned?
Not really. Like nothing really exciting going on. I got to pick up some. Now the money's at the bank for the duplex. I'm starting to pick up materials for the triplex. So I'm going with my dad to pick up some stuff tomorrow. Some vanities and some shower stuff. And then actually it's very similar to you. I've got friends that are doing some renovations at like their mom's house. And my buddy has a bad back. And so I'm like, I'll go over and help you move like the stove and all those appliances. So we actually both have moving plans this weekend. Other than that, nothing terribly exciting. I'm probably going to hop off this live sooner than later because I went and picked up dinner for Katie and I. Unfortunately, I was running a little late picking it up, which meant that I started this live on an empty stomach.
No, you should have said something. We couldn't move the live, man.
No. And I definitely wasn't going to eat on the live. So Katie, after a hard shift, fairly so, just grabbed her stuff and went downstairs and started mucking. But I haven't done the same. So that's probably gonna be step one. There's a chance I gotta text a couple of the people that I was going to go running with. There's a chance I go for a first run in a very long time tomorrow morning, kind of before things go. So we'll see how that goes. Embarrassing story this week. I was, as part of this health focus, I'm like, you know what? Like, not just as a dude, but like in general, I'm like, some of my mobility is pretty crap. And so I'm like, I'm going to do a couple mobility exercises, especially for like my hip. Fucking injured myself. So I shit you not, I did 2 hip exercises. I woke up the next day and one of my hips was absolutely killing me. And I was like, I text my brother who's a chiropractor, and I'm like, hey man, this is what happened. He's like, yeah, this is just further validation that you need more mobility. And I'm like, okay, done.
People don't believe me, so I'm going to show everyone here. This is literally, I tell people in the office that, or on our team, that I do yoga stretches. This is literally what's right beside on the ground. Lacrosse ball and foam roller and yoga mat. And I flip this monitor over so I can run stuff and like do my pretty much stretching as much as possible. Stretch, man. I suck. I'm the same way. Like I rarely do it. Like maybe once a week, twice a week, if that. But it's just
trying to get that daily habit or that daily process kind of going on, or whatever frequency you feel is necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah. With that, man, I don't know if any. I know there's like only a few people still watching, but if anybody has any questions, great. If not, Eddie, I think I'll toss it over to you to do the beloved sign off, man.
All right. If you don't have any questions, I guess thank you so much, Matt. You're the man. Appreciate you for everything that you do. And I'm so looking forward to seeing what's going to happen with your triplex. I really am. So keep us posted and start posting more, I guess, more content. I want to see the before and after. It's going to look great.
Yeah, sounds good, buddy. Thanks. Have a good one. Don't hurt yourself. Make sure you stretch before you do any of that, any of the lifting. And we'll talk again soon. Thanks for everybody that tuned in. Always appreciate it. Take care, guys. Have a good one.
All right, much love, everyone. All right, bye.